Hi, I'm Christian Levy with miracleofyoga.com. In my last video post, I explained the basic perspective of how to approach a beginner yoga practice. See that you concentrate on yoga poses that affect the whole body, not just specific parts. Learn basic fundamental poses and learn how to do them correctly. Now, having laid the foundation of the perspective, how to approach your beginning yoga practice, let me just show you the actual yoga poses that we want to begin with. This video is not an instructional video on how to do these poses, and you want to make sure you learn to do these poses correctly. But I want to show you what poses are the ones that you want to begin with. The first pose is always Tadasana, the mountain pose. In Tadasana, you stand straight and balance your body. The next pose we learn comes from Tadasana. It's called Urdhva Hastasana, which means upward arms. From Tadasana, we stretch the arms straight up. In Tadasana and Urdhva Hastasana, we begin to learn the basic instructions of how to work the legs, how to work the arms, how to lift the chest without letting the lower back bow in, these basic things. Then we go to the more complicated beginning level standing poses. Vrikshasana, tree pose. You've probably seen this. This is a very common pose. Learning how to correctly use the legs in Tadasana and balance your body is the key foundation to learning how to balance in Vrikshasana, tree pose. There's many ways this pose can be done. You can hold the ankle if you need to. The hands can come to the chest if you can't take them over the head. You can do the pose leaning literally with the wall or with your side to the wall to help balance. We have many ways to adapt these poses. Then we have Utthita Trikonasana, extended triangle pose. In the beginning, we walk the feet apart. And again, with this pose, we have to learn how to work the legs and the arms in Tadasana so that we can understand the basic actions in this pose, Utthita Trikonasana. Then we go to Utthita Parsvakonasana, extended side angle pose. The front leg bends. The hand comes down, perhaps onto a support. The arm extends over the head. Virabhadrasana 2, warrior pose. The front leg bends to 90 degrees. And then we introduce a pose where we turn the pelvis the opposite direction in the standing poses. This pose is called Parshvottanasana, intense side stretch. Now in this one, the back foot turns in more than the other poses. And the very, very beginning level instructions have the hands on the hips, and we learn to turn the pelvis to face over the front leg, which is exactly the opposite as the previous poses, where we want the pelvis to become in line with the plane of the pose, the legs. Here we turn the pelvis to become perpendicular to the plane of the pose, the line of the legs. This right here is actually the very first stage we learn in Parsvottanasana. Then eventually the hands come down and we concave the back before then taking the head all the way down. This pose is commonly done with support for the hands. The hips turn, the chest opens, the trunk extends forward. If you're stiffer and your back is rounded, which you can see from the side, then we take support for the hands because the first stage is making the back concave. Then we eventually learn to take the head down. And the final standing pose that we concentrate on at the beginning level is called Prasarita Padottanasana. Legs stretched apart pose. The hands come to the floor or a block if you're stiffer and you need the support. Because again, here we don't want to let the back round in the beginning. But we have to learn to concave the back, to lift up in the chest. This is the first stage. Eventually the pose takes the head down. All of these poses are standing poses. They fall in the category called standing poses because obviously you're standing on your feet doing the poses. Another beginning level pose that's excellent to do in between standing poses is the modified downward facing dog. Which is also a type of standing pose. Now, following standing poses, we go to the category called seated poses. The very first seated pose that we learn is called Dandasana. Dandasana means staff pose. The legs are stretched in front, the hands are by the hips, the spine ascends, the chest lifts. In Dandasana, many people find it helpful to support the hips on blankets, because in Dandasana we have to learn to lift the spine. And when the back of the legs are when the back of the legs are stiffer, the low back rounds back and the spine is short. Sitting up on blankets or a block helps us move the spine in so the spine becomes long. And then we can lift the chest. Dandasana. The next seated pose is a kneeling pose called a Virasana. And although many of you can probably kneel with no problem, we put a blanket between the legs. This makes the pose more therapeutic for the knees. Virasana. This is the beginning stage of Virasana. If you cannot sit back kneeling, then you can simply use more props. The first blanket goes behind the knees. And if you don't sit all the way down, you can take as many blankets as you need so that the buttocks are supported and you can learn to sit straight and open the chest. Next, we have Baddha Konasana, bound angle pose. From Dandasana, the soles of the feet come together, the knees go apart. Again here, for those of you who are stiffer, with the knees higher than the waist, we sit on blankets or a block. When you take the hips up, it helps bring the knees in the proper relationship with the trunk. The knees should not be higher than the waists. Baddha Konasana. So we have the standing poses. We have these 3 seated poses. And then we want to add an inversion where you're upside down. In the beginning, the inversion should be very, very simple, easy, and accessible. The first inversion that we learn is simply laying on the back with the legs up the wall. This posture can be done actively. It can also be used as a resting pose and be done passively. And finally, the last category of poses that you want to make sure that you always include from the very beginning of your yoga practice is a relaxation pose. The classic relaxation pose is called Shavasana. And in Shavasana, you simply lay flat on your back. Shavasana can also be done with the legs on a chair if you have back issues. You can also support underneath the knees with a blanket or a bolster. So I just wanted to give you a quick rundown of the exact yoga poses that you should begin your yoga practice with. Standing poses, seated poses, an inversion with the legs up, and a relaxation pose. Make sure that you learn these poses correctly. If you simply follow the basic form, position, or look of the pose, you don't really know what you're doing in the pose and you won't get the most out of it. So see that you learn the instructions correctly, and if you are a beginner, stick with these poses for a while, because these poses will safely open your body, strengthen your body, begin to balance your body, and create a foundation from which you can always add more and more sophisticated yoga poses in a safe, effective manner. Thanks for joining me. I'm Christian Levy with miracleofyoga.com.